I didn't understand how I could be, how I could show up to my coworkers as a person of faith and not, I think, offend them or think or have them think that I was weird or weak or, whatever. And so for a long time, I didn't identify in the workplace as a Christian.
Well, hello everyone. Tommy Lee again for Up Next. And today I get a chance to talk with a new friend, Denise Young. And so over in San Francisco, we met in Austin and now here we are talking. So welcome, Denise.
Thank you so much for having me on your show, Tommy. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, this whole idea, yeah, I think a lot of times with the Resource Global and Up Next, it goes to all of our different cohorts in our 13 global cities. But the whole idea that we're going to talk about is journey. Because who you are and how you got and what you're doing right now is a culmination of how God has been working in your life. So I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit about what you do.
Well, thanks. And I think journey is a very important, appropriate word because that was actually part of the name of the Christian nonprofit ministry that I started up about 5 years ago. It was called Faith and Work Journey. So you're speaking to my heart when you use that language.
Yeah, you serve currently as the founder direct of Faith and Work Journey in San Francisco. Talk to me about what it does. How long have you been doing it? What's your hope for the organization?
Yeah, yeah. So actually, let me clarify that I had started a faith and work journey about 5+ years ago, kind of as a side hustle to my career in the business and corporate world. But I had started faith and work journey because I wanted to create an experience that I wish I had when I was
Yeah.
starting in my career. I became a Christian around the same time that I started my professional career. And I was very passionate about both of those, but really didn't receive a lot of teaching or had a lot of understanding of how those two things, what those two things had to do with each other. And it was only through a lot of research, a lot of prayer, seeking out resources to learn about it, that I ended up getting kind of God's full vision
Yeah.
for my career and my faith and work. And so, through the years since then, for the last 20 or so years, I've had the opportunity to share what I've learned, and continue to learn about faith and work integration. So I started Faith and Work Journey about 5 years ago. But then just in the last year, that kind of side hustle has
Hmm.
become more of
Hmm.
a main hustle, and that I have
Yeah.
co founded a larger organization called the Bay Area Center for Faith, Work, and Tech. And so
Uh,
that's what we're working on now. And we actually just launched that now. So you're catching me at a really exciting time in my journey.
yeah. 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 Denise, before all this, what was your full-time job? What were you doing before this?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and again, I still do have this like full-time job in the corporate world. Right now, I'm a keynote speaker. So I
Yeah.
get to go to companies and conferences really around the world and talk with business leaders about how to engage their employees and their customers in extraordinary experiences. And I got that start, I came up kind of through the marketing world and the advertising agency world. My last corporate job was with Sony Electronics, where I was heading up brand and strategy for that
Uh,
corporation. But that was, yeah, I left a long time ago to start my own, consulting practice. And that consulting practice then morphed into a speaking business. And so now I still do speaking engagements as a keynote speaker.
yeah. Yeah. At what point did you, like, for instance, with Resource Global, it just kind of fizzled along and all of that. I was doing some other jobs and then it was a passion project. And then suddenly I switched over to this full time. Even for you, how did you make that switch where
Yeah.
it was a side hustle, it was a passion project, and you switched over? How did that come about for
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell my story and then I'd love to hear yours too, Tommy, because I really kind of am right in the middle of that transition. So Faith Over Journey was something I was doing on the side, kind of on my own as almost like what you call a parachurch organization, where I was running these discipleship programs and faith and work just on my own. I had a board of advisors and we were just doing our thing, but not really connected to the local church or to any kind of bigger network. And because of that, we were having problems scaling and really
Yeah.
kind of increasing our influence. And so a few years back, I had met a guy named Paul Taylor, who is a pastor at a church in Palo Alto, California. And he has a real passion for faith and work, and actually worked in tech, went to Stanford Engineering School. And so has a real like heart for business and tech. And we bonded over our mutual interest in this topic. And as we kept in touch over time, he finally, came to me as I'm right in the middle of, oh, how am I going to scale this side hustle? And he said,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about starting up this Bay Area Center for Faith and Work. All these other cities, whether it's New York with the Center for Faith and Work out of Redeemer, or Chicago, LA, Denver, all of these cities have these centers. Why doesn't the Bay Area have one? And so we decided to partner together and start this new organization. And, for the first, I would say like 6 months or so, we were just kind of talking, dreaming, kind of planning what this could be. And then probably I would say earlier this year, like January, February, it started to get real, and it started to demand more and more of my time. And so I thought I would be able to kind of do 50% of my corporate job and 50% in this new organization. And what has happened is this new organization has just kind of like
Yeah.
consumed me. So like I said, I'm still doing some speaking, but in the corporate world, but less so. And over time, I think I will continue to move into retirement in that part of my life and just have faith
Yeah.
work and tech become the thing. But
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was my journey. I mean, how did it happen for you, Tommy?
I built cell towers for about 10 years after business school over at Washington University. And then, and I was sitting there volunteering at my church, and I was doing high school ministry and college ministry. And I went to seminary. And Denise, I thought I was going to be a pastor. I'm a Chinese guy, but I worked in a Korean church for about 3 years. And it was
Mm,
during that
mm,
period of time that I realized God did not call me to be a pastor. And then from that point, I worked at Moody Bible Institute in the president's office here in Chicago. And I realized working in a top down nonprofit ministry organization probably wasn't my personality as well, too. And so then I took a bunch of different side gigs. I worked with InterVarsity and the Urbana Missions Conference, and with Chip Ingram on Living on the Edge and Lausanne and all of those things. I said, do I really want to spend my life working as a consultant all the time? Maybe a little bit. And so I'll still, like right now, I still work with Wheaton College and Together LA and all that stuff. But I wanted to do something that really would inspire and work with young Christian marketplace leaders in
mm,
different global cities, because I saw how different cities were growing. But in the early days, it was just a concept. Churches didn't understand what we were trying to do. They weren't paying attention because we send out missionaries to all the ends of the earth, and funding was hard. So I needed something with all my consulting jobs to help provide funding. But
mm,
eventually, in time, as you saw some of the funding open up, then you made that switch. And
mm,
to this
mhm,
day, I mean, we start with $0. Resource Global is at about 1.2, $1.3 million. It still is hard. And you want to get to a point where we're trying to figure out what to do with the next 16 years of our strategic plan. But wow, but at the same time, you just have to take a faith. And I'm not sure if I would have done this again, knowing all the hard work that I would have done, but it's been a fun journey.
Wow, wow, what a journey. Yeah, for sure. I love how, you kind of have brought together or really been able to focus your passion, like bringing together all these different experiences that you had and saying, this is what I want to
Yes.
do. And I would argue, this is what you were called to do. You're extremely gifted at it. You're so effective. You've built this organization. And, I think that God sometimes puts on some people's hearts this just do this. And this is a thing that he's had for you, and faith work in Texas is a thing that he's had for me. And
Yeah.
and who are we to say, no, I'd rather, just go work at some,
Yeah.
stable job where I'm just doing whatever. It's like, no, this
Yeah.
is this is ours to do. So yeah, it's very cool.
Denise, did you grow up in the Bay Area?
No, so speaking of the Midwest, I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. And then
Yeah.
yeah, and then I actually went to school in Chicago. So we kind of have flipped it a little bit. But Yeah, so I am kind of a Midwest girl in my roots, but I've spent most of my adult life in San Diego. Spent part of my adult life in New York, and then now here in San Francisco. So,
Got it.
and that I will say that while you saw the opportunity in all of these cities around the globe, and I think have been able to enter into the local context in all these different cities, I think that right now my part is very much for
Yeah.
the San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I moved here 8 years ago, I came to two conclusions. One is that there is tremendous opportunity for influence here. This is the first time in my life where I was making friends with people who were very influential at like Apple and Google and LinkedIn and all of these companies that really shape culture around the world. And so tremendous opportunity. But the second conclusion I had coming here is that there was tremendous need. At the time, there weren't a lot of formative experiences for young marketplace leaders, people who were interested in pursuing their faith and their careers. And
Yeah.
like I said, I kind of wish that I had had that when I was coming up. And so I was like, I want to be part of their journey of discipling them through their process. And so the combination of that great opportunity and great need gave birth to Faith and Work Journey, and now to the Bay Area Center for Faith,
Yeah.
Work, and Tech.
And
Yeah.
Denise, I feel like this conversation has evolved. And I think I'm 47 years old, so I'm older than you. So I think a
Oh
lot
my
of times
gosh, Tommy, you wish. You wish, or I wish, I should say. But go ahead.
well, more so, wouldn't you say that when we were just graduating
Mm,
from college, the faith and work conversation was let's put our scripture on our cubicle or desk. Let's have a
mm.
Bible study over lunch, and let's put a Bible verse or play Christian music from your cubicle, your office, and all that stuff. That was the thinking behind it. And then afterward, why don't you serve the church or and give money to the church? But I think it was really Tim Keller and then Catherine Leary Allstor, and then you get the Andy Crouches of the world now start talking through how has God designed you? What are you meant to be? I think that's when the conversation still started evolving.
Yeah.
And I would probably still say, I am very surprised that some people still, this faith and work conversation is still brand new to some people.
Yeah, well, and Tommy, I will confess to you that even though I was a Christian, um, for the first many years of my career, I wasn't even putting Bible verses on my in my cubicle or playing, Christian music. I was very much in the closet about my faith because I didn't understand how I could be, how I could show up to my coworkers as a person of faith and not, I think, offend them or think or have them think that I was weird or weak or, whatever. And so for a long time, I didn't identify in the workplace as a Christian. And I think it was that kind of compartmentalization
Yeah,
that really it started to bother me a lot. And it was like, okay, I can't continue on this. What do these two things really have to do with each other? And then to your point, to get the vision that being a Christian professional includes sharing your faith with your coworkers, but it's so much more than that as well. And I think to your point, I think Tim Keller probably influenced my thinking and my faith in general, but my thinking
yeah,
about that uh, most significantly. And then you mentioned Andy Crouch, and his book Culture Making came out around the time when I was
yeah,
really deep into
yeah, yeah, yeah,
exploration on
yeah,
this.
yeah,
And for the first time, I realized what I'm doing in my work is culture making, or it should be culture making. It is really shaping the
yeah.
culture around me, and the products and services I'm working on. Those are shaping culture. And so it really reframes, what your work is and why it matters. But to your point, Tommy, yes, it's still, I don't know if that understanding is definitely not as widely understood as we would like it to be, right?
Yeah. To this day, I feel like the defining moment for me is worked in the corporate world, building cell towers for 10 years. I'm sitting in seminary and the professor asked the class, what is the main purpose of a pastor in caring and ministering to their marketplace leaders? There was a student who sat next to me, pastor. He stood up and he says, our primary purpose is to help our folks in our congregation preach Christ in the workplace. They just
Mm.
preach Christ, preach Christ, preach Christ. And if they are rejected, so be it. And I sat there, I remember looking at him, and we got to be friends. I'm saying, oh, if you do this, you're going to drive everyone crazy. You're
Right.
just going to drive everyone crazy. But I said, well, for me, it's doing a great job. It's being exemplified in everything I do. It's treating people with honor and respect. And when the opportunity comes, because of how well I do my job, I care for Christ. And that led me on a journey to say, well, how do I do that with all these different people around the world? And then the whole world opened up with Jakarta, Nairobi, all of those things. And so now that really has driven me all these years for the last 10 years.
Wow, that's so exciting. And I wish that I could say that I had a light bulb moment like that. I'm not sure that I did so much as when I was in San Diego back now over 20 years ago, I was part of a church planting movement, and the pastor that of the church I was in came from Redeemer and had been good friends with Tim Keller and at that time, the Center for Faith and Work at Redeemer was just starting. And so this pastor, a wonderful man, Dick Kaufman, wanted to have a similar kind of center in San Diego. And so that's when he said, why don't Denise, why don't you go see what you can do with this marketplace ministry thing? I was like, wow, okay, well, how would I design something that would equip people in the church to understand this faith and work integration? And to his credit, Pastor Dick was just so open and so not just willing, but wanting to disciple his congregation and actually the entire church planting movement in this holistic understanding of work. But I find that perspective to be very rare. And,
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
Tommy, you and I have talked about how many pastors still are very much like the person that you talked about in seminary who see, Christians in the workplace primary opportunities evangelism when, again, very important. But I think in the context that most young people and most people in general who are working in the business world today, if they overemphasize evangelism, to your point, not only will they turn people up, but in many cases, their companies will have a really big issue with them doing that. Even
Yeah.
though companies say that they're all about diversity and equity and inclusion, you can be anything, but you can't be
Yeah.
a evangelical Christian in the workplace. But I think if you bring your values to your workplace, if you bring
Mhm.
the perspective of how can we responsibly develop products and services that promote human flourishing, how do I lead my team in a way that allows God's gifts to be shown through all of them? I mean, all of that is part of God's vision for our work. And I think that there's so many more opportunities than
Yeah.
pastors and people realize.
Oh my gosh, the very fact, let's say, even in terms of building cell towers, the very fact that how I treated my clients at Verizon Wireless Nextel, how I treated with our in-house legal counsel, accounting, the janitor, the front office, how I treated everyone with respect, and the fact that I did such a good job that all those clients would come back and give us business if I was working on it, says that you're honoring them with the skills that God has given you and how to work with those things. I think
Yeah.
that's such an important conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, now hearing you talk about that, I think what maybe was part of my journey was the discovery. So as I said, I kind of came up in the marketing and advertising world, and my job at Sony was very much about brand building. Um and I think I could have continued down on that route of marketing and brand building as a career. I think though that as I thought about how has God wired me? What is his vision for using my gifts and talents? This idea of brand leadership and organizational leadership came much more to the forefront. And that's how I ended up kind of shifting my consulting and my speaking to speak more about overall leadership and overall organizational health and culture, leading with purpose and values. And of course, that extends externally to how a company promotes itself out in the marketplace, but it is just as much about how organizational leaders build up
Correct.
their people as well. And so I think that, as I said, I think part of my journey was discovering, okay, I think if I'm going to create culture, the way that I feel most called to create culture is building up business leaders who are wise, who are thoughtful, who are faithful, who are committed to their people and to their values. And whether or not they're believers or not, I feel like there's so much good that
Yeah.
I can be a part of if I really lean into that opportunity.
Yeah. And Denise, a lot of times it's this whole idea of journey. Let's say, for instance, if we look at scripture, I have always been fascinated by David. Here he was
Mhm.
when Samuel comes calling Jesse. Jesse brings all of his kids there. He forgets David. What was David doing? He was a shepherd taking care of the sheep. That guy had boring job. But man, that boring job, he used it to allow him to learn how to protect the sheep. It was the time where he spoke with God. It was monotony, the same thing over and over again. It was literally like God was telling David, I want you to learn to take care of this little flock of sheep because one day I'm preparing you for a bigger flock. And then you would think
Yeah.
that after David and Goliath, everything would go well. No, no. Saul actually goes after him because of Saul's insecurity. He loses his job. He loses his wife. He loses his mentor. He ends up best friend. He ends up in the city of Gath in the Philistines, and then he ends up in the cave of Adullam. Everything is taken away from him. But that's when
Mhm.
God started working. It's that journey
Mhm.
of looking Moses. I am fascinated by that journey and how God uses good and bad to mold us to become who we are.
Yeah, and so I'm fascinated by Joseph's journey and very
Yeah.
similar in the good and the bad, like his brothers like beat him, left him for dead, like sold him to slavery. And, that could have been a real turning point for Joseph to be like, I forget, forget this righteous life that God is calling you to. But I think, when he was in slavery, that, then he kind of rose to be an advisor, in the royal palace. Then he was back in prison. And then, then he ends up being kind of like the prime minister for Pharaoh. Like in both these like horrible situations, as well as these very elevated positions, Joseph is faithful to what God has called him to. And actually, in our curriculum for faith work and tech, we go through the journey of Joseph and we kind of contrast this idea of what does it mean to be faithful versus what does it mean to be successful? Because I think that as business people, we're always driving that success, and it's all about scale, and it's all about metrics, it's all about outcomes. And certainly, to some extent, those things are important because they're indicators of whether you're effective or not. But I think God really calls us to be faithful in all circumstances, whether we are at the top of the of the org chart or whether we are, in in literal slavery. Um, to be faithful to His calling, to the way that He wants us to show up, to a mission to serve others. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
But I have to say that both of these stories, both David and Joseph, are primarily stories about God's faithfulness, right?
Hmm.
And God, the way that God has travels with people through all these different circumstances. And praise the Lord that He is the kind of God that goes with us, right?
And Denise, for your group, here's one thing I learned, which I love about Joseph, right?
Uh-huh.
Genesis chapter 33. Esau and Jacob. Esau's coming and telling Jacob, I am coming to meet you. He sends word. And later on, Jacob thinks, this guy that I have taken advantage of, my older brother who I have taken advantage of, wants to come and see me. And then when they
Mm-hmm.
come, 400 men come to him. And the guy is scared. And what does Esau do? He forgives him and he
Yes.
embraces him. But
Yes.
the one observation, and I had to, as soon as you said that, is chapter 33:2. He put the servants with their children in front, then Leah with her children, and Rachel and Joseph last of all. I
Right.
wonder if the author of Genesis, he doesn't give us any of the name of the children. He gives us one child, Joseph,
Joseph.
to
Hmm.
tell us
Hmm.
specifically that
Hmm.
Joseph was
Hmm.
there that day, so he could see his uncle Esau forgive his dad for taking advantage of him, because 20 years later he had to do the same thing.
I love the story, yes, that Joseph had this example, right?
Yeah.
Of a- and what I love about that story, again talking about the journeys of different people, you know, Jacob, like what? He puts all these people, all these things in front of him. He's like at the very back, like, don't hurt me. I don't want to
Yeah.
be attacked. I don't, you know. And so even in our, like when we are hiding, when we are afraid, when, we want to be faithful, but we're still a little bit hesitant. God provides, God shows up.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I'm just so thankful that we have these stories to encourage us, right?
Yeah. But it's really the insecurity of leaders. If you look at some of the leaders,
Mhm,
you
mhm,
look at
mhm.
Judas, the insecurity that Judas saw, his insecurity. I think even in terms of Solomon, as wise as he was giving in, it's some of the insecurity, that insecurity drives us in everything that we
Mm.
do.
You're wise. You're very wise, Tommy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, right?
Denise, a quick question for you. I mean, when you were a younger girl, if you think through everything like that, I mean, here you are, successful career in branding, marketing. What did you think you were going to do when you were a little girl growing up?
Huh. I first thought that I would be a ballet dancer. So I started up dancing when
Yeah.
I was very young and actually danced with a professional company as a child for many years. Um, my father quickly disabused me of the notion of becoming a professional dancer. So then when I was considering careers, actually, now you're talking about our age. You'll remember the show, LA Law. Yeah,
Yes. With
yes, yes.
Harry Hamlin and Susan Day.
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
And Jimmy
yes,
Smith.
yes. Right. And I thought, oh, I want to be an attorney. And so I actually went to go intern at a law firm for actually a couple of summers while I was in high school. And it was a great opportunity, but it quickly made me realize being an attorney is not as glamorous as the TV shows make it. Um, and so I went into school, not exactly sure what I wanted to do, but I found a paper of mine that I had written when I was in junior high about Nike, the brand. So this is right around Nike was coming out and kind of rising to its ascension as a global brand. And I remember writing, I remember thinking at the time, this is fascinating that all of a sudden people are wearing like the logo, the swoosh logo on their shirts, and everyone is caring about what brands that people are buying. And I thought, wow, that's how it's fascinating how a company could influence people's thinking and influence people's purchase decisions. And so I had a suspicion that I might get into some area of like kind of marketing or sales. And so then when I was in school, I ended up selling advertising for the local newspaper. I really got into
Yeah.
that idea of how do you influence people through print ads. And so I think this theme of like influencing and influencing culture, influencing the way people think, act, communicate, what they buy, what they share, has always been kind of a theme for me. And now with faith work and tech, I'm hopefully being used to influence people in their journeys
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
either founding companies or leading companies or actually just working in some of these most influential companies. And to hopefully being a faithful presence and a advocate for human flourishing in the organizations. We have folks in the faith work and tech community who talk about how at work they're incentivized to drive people to use their mobile devices as much as possible,
Yeah.
or to use or to consume as much content as possible. But then them being Christians know that's not
Yeah.
healthy,
Yeah.
that there needs to be a balance and a kind of a thoughtful engagement with technology. And so how do they bring that perspective to their jobs? How do they share with their
Yeah.
colleagues that, well, hey, maybe
Yeah.
there's a different way for us to be thinking about the
Right.
metrics for our success?
Yes. And
Yeah.
even in
And so
terms of
that's the kind of thing. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
oh,
Yeah.
no, even the creativity of, all right, I know you guys want to make revenue, but how do I increase revenue, but also help people engage with technology in a healthy way? How can I
Yes.
think outside the box and do some of these things?
Right, right, yes. And then now with AI being such a huge force in all aspects of companies and of business and the way that companies interact with customers, um, I think there needs to be a lot of thought about, okay, we as Christians know that we are created beings, that there is a creator, that we're human. There is a limit to there is a God given natural good limit to our ability as humans. And we should not be looking to technology to try to replace us or
Yeah.
to take over our humanity, but rather to enable us to connect better, to engage better, I think be more faithful to what God
Right.
has given to us. And so how do you do that? I mean, those are the kinds of conversations that we want to have with folks to say, we don't have all the answers, but we know that right now, it seems like the possibilities of AI are endless. How do we put some guardrails, or how do we think about this in a way that only Christians could bring to the
Yeah.
conversation?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Because if God has created us to be creative and to really be able to imagine, think through all these things, but He also wants us to flourish and create cities, and you want people earning more money, all of those different things. How how do we do all these different things? And then even around the world, how do we tap into the ideas, whether it's folks in Africa who also think differently, in Asia who thinks differently, and all together as Christ followers, we're always doing this.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, when I think about folks in some of these developing countries where there's so much creativity and so much entrepreneurship. And so how do we support people who are wanting to start companies or have great product ideas, or, have the seed of a product that they want to build? And how do we shepherd them along in this process so that they are building a sustaining
Yeah,
company, that they are engaging with their employees, with their partners, with their communities in ways that create sustainability, economic wealth, as well as social, mental, psychological health for everyone who's they're
yeah,
touching. I think they're unfortunately, I think as startup founders and entrepreneurs, there are a lot of temptations, and you can make some very bad decisions if you are not really thinking through what are the implications of this. And so
yeah,
our desire is to help people think more about what does it mean to create a product? What does it mean to drive revenues and profits, and to treat everyone to promote fair practices, to treat everyone with justice and equity. Um, yeah, those are things that I'm not sure that would naturally come to an entrepreneur, but we want to help
yeah.
them, think through that.
Denise, quick question. I mean, since January, you really ramped this thing up. And now, I mean, even in terms of my engagement with you, you've been trying to work with different ministries, all of that stuff. I have my thoughts and opinion. What has been the good of learning to partner with other ministries? And in this space, what has been challenges that you see as you partnered with different ministries?
Hmm. Wow. Well, thank you for asking that question, Tommy, because one of the strategies for the Bay Area Center for Faith, Work, and Tech is to connect all of the different partners and all of the different great organizations out there, because, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. Obviously, we're creating new programs to fill unmet needs, but there's a lot of connection and convening that we can do as an organization. And so working with partners is critical to that. So we have a big summit that's coming up here in San Francisco on Saturday, November 2nd, where we really want to showcase all the great organizations that are out there, and not necessarily shine the spotlight on us, but to help other people connect to these other great organizations. And, I will say that it's been almost all good. I have to say, and probably because we're still so early in our process, that everyone's really excited and everyone wants to
Mm.
work with us. And I think also because we are making the summit not about us, but about our partners, I'm hoping that our partners see that as a genuine care and
Yeah,
ministry on our part. But I will say that, everyone has their own style, their own priorities. Some partners are more generous than others. Some partners are more willing to collaborate and say, "Hey, we want to do this, and we'll do this very freely." Um, And so, I think it's just understanding how do different organizations want to engage.
Yeah.
What is the need or what is the value that we can bring to them? Because if we're not being a good partner to them, if we're not making them feel like they can trust us and that we have their best interests in mind, that we are actually adding value to what they're doing and not detracting or competing, all of that, we need to make sure that they believe that. And if we're not doing that, then,
Yeah.
shame on us for not engaging people in the right way.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know, Tommy, what has been your experience with this? Because I actually, to your point, we met in Austin, where the Austin Center for Faith and Work was just launching. And you were a great resource to that. Tommy, and you, Resource Global, were a great resource to the Austin Center for Faith and Work. And so I was very impressed with that partnership. And so I'm curious, like, what has been your experience with
Yeah.
that?
I find with different ministries, Denise, is they always say, I have to be laser focused on what God is calling me to do. But in the midst of being laser focused, they don't want to partner with anyone. So if it doesn't help me
Mm,
achieve my goal, I don't want to partner with you. Or if
mm,
you want to partner with me, you're going to have to help me build because I have to be focused on my goal. But that means a partnership, it's a give or take. You have to
yeah.
understand what the goals of the other organization is. How do you help them accomplish all those things? And if you do that, then people will want to partner with you long term. That's the only thing. And I find with Christians a lot of time, like in the for-profit world, you're willing to do it because everyone shares the profit, and then you tangibly can see that. Here, you don't
Mm,
always
mm.
see it. It makes it a little tough.
Yeah, and to your point, I think that there's a perception that you're competing for resources, whether it's funding, from donors, or resources in terms of volunteers or participants. And so sometimes I think that folks can feel like, oh, well, if I partner with you or if I give this to you, that I'm going to have less for us.
Yeah.
And it's too bad, but we are all, as we talked about with David and Joseph and even Jacob, we're all sinful people, and on this side of heaven, we will continue to have some of those corrupt or distorted thoughts. But I think that, what we are hoping to do at Faith Work and Tech is to be as open as we can. And because we're new and because we're small, we certainly can't do everything that we want to do. And so we have to rely on our partners. We have to say, you know what, um, we want to do this thing, but rather than you helping us do it, let us help you do it because you are in much better
Yeah.
position to do it. And so, um, I think that is one of the key values that Paul and I have set for our organization, and
Yeah.
is to be as open as possible.
Yeah. Your long term plan, in terms of what you're hoping to do in the Bay Area, what does that look like for you guys? Are you guys hoping to always work in the Bay Area, or are you hoping to build relationships with other people from other states and do something different? Where are you hoping it will evolve to?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So in terms of our program, so as I said, we will be creating programs. In fact, we just launched a church-based program. And so for our programs, they will be almost exclusively San Francisco Bay Area, because again, there is such a need here. And I think both Paul and I feel a real, passion and burden for discipling people here in the Bay Area. Um, but that's the create part of our strategy. The connect part of our strategy, I mentioned connecting all of the great organizations that are out there, or connecting people to those great organizations. Again, start in the Bay Area, but for example, we are so thankful for our partnership with Resource Global. And if we can connect people to what you're doing in all areas of the world, that would be a great honor and blessing for us to be able to do that. So our connect strategy will lead us, I think, outside of strictly the Bay Area. And then, catalyzing new efforts, as people go through our programs, that as they start up new businesses, as they start up new organizations, maybe even new churches. Again, I think those won't be limited to the San Francisco Bay Area. Um, so I guess maybe you kind of think about concentric circles. Our primary priority is this region because there
Yeah.
is so much need, and even we might have a little bit of overinflated sense of our importance. So fully confess that. But we do believe that, what happens here impacts the world. And so we definitely want to be part of discipling people here. Um, but I think we'll see the ripple effects beyond
Yeah.
that. And in one area in particular, Tommy, now that I think about it, this conversation about faithful engagement with tech, faithful engagement with AI, faithful engagement with crypto, all these new technologies. I think that the Bay Area Center for Faith Work and Tech are uniquely positioned to host some of those conversations or to spur those conversations
Yeah.
and to contribute to them. And those, of course, are global conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
hope that we'll be able to bring people from all around the world into those.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Hey, if people wanted more information about you, the center, all this stuff, where can they find social media, website, all of that?
Yeah, yeah. Tommy, thanks so much for asking. So faithworktech.org is our website. And you can learn about us and about Paul and me there. And then we also are on LinkedIn, the Bay Area Center for Faith Work and Tech. We're on Instagram, Faith Work Tech. And then, of course, you can always find me on social media, Denise Lee Yohn, either deniseleeyohn.com, that's my corporate site, or Denise Lee Yohn on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram.
Okay.
We try to be everywhere, Tommy.
Thank you very much. And don't be surprised. I'm going to be calling you again because we're going to talk about a variety of different options. So thank you for this.
Thank you, Tommy, and thank you for your partnership and for the great work you're doing out there.